having to do large retcons because of small errors. Tale as old as time. Today we're looking at the creation of a brand new character, sorta, by accident. It's sorta a brand new character. It was all accident. So we're going to be going back along the lines of something like Donna Troy, who was initially just a de-aged version of Wonder Woman, who another creator mistook as a separate character. We're also going to throw in a dash of creators not remembering / checking that the remembrances are correct. So missing salient details, like Grant Morrison just running with the misremembrance that Talia al Ghul assaulted Bruce to conceive Damian. Both of those aforementioned scenarios required retcons to sort them out. In the case of Donna, ever-evolving retcons. Who is Donna Troy? The outing we're about to look at is not gonna get as messy as that got. And I think it's a mistake that many fans are all the happier for. However, if you disagree, you let me know down below, but it was the mistake that gave the world Ice, or rather, the Icemaiden that was Tora Olafsdotter. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and it's time to clear up some of that confusion that's floating around surrounding Ice / Icemaiden. Because there are two Icemaidens, and sometimes the actions or characteristics of one are misattributed to the other, or there's just confusion in some circles. And it's completely understandable because of how the second Icemaiden arose. Now, if you're aware of Ice, you may often have seen her associated with fire. But you may also have seen the character called Icemaiden. Or you may have seen a character with blue skin and ice powers also going by Icemaiden, with different hair or even sometimes with the same hair. So what exactly was going on? For that, we need to go back to the beginning. Our beginning for this tale takes us back to tie-ins. Let's quickly take a look at Fire, Beatriz da Costa, or as she was originally named when she first debuted, Green Fury. Now Fire, or Green Fury, did not debut in the main universe. She debuted in the Super Friends tie-in comics, and was created by E. Nelson Bridwell and Ramona Fradon, first appearing in issue 25 in 1979. It is important to note her creator Bridwell, who was a notorious canon fiend, obsessed with details and trying to find ways to just make everything fit nicely together. So when he created characters, even if they weren't in canon at the moment, it was always with the mindset that they could be transferred over into the main canon at any point, so that they would have all of the important details you would need for that there. And that of course includes things like civilian names. This desire to transfer things over to the main continuity with ease would pay off for him. He would end up being able to do it with Fire and his team, the Global Guardians, in DC Comics Presents 46 in 1982. And this was pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths, so Fire would go over with her Super Friends backstory first and then have it retconned post-Crisis. So that's Fire, but what about Ice? Well, before Green Fury even debuted, there was Icemaiden. But not Tora, Sigrid Nansen. Sigrid was actually created first and debuted in Super Friends number 9 in 1977, also created by Bridwell and Fradon. But unlike Green Fury, who would go on to be utilized multiple times in the Super Friends, Sigrid would only be used once. But in that appearance, the character's civilian name is given. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, and apparently it was missed, but it's there. And again, it's very deliberately inserted. They add parentheses and everything, because Bridwell was like that. You need to know what the character's name is. However, it doesn't appear that there is as much fondness for Icemaiden, because Icemaiden didn't make the transfer over with the Global Guardians, and wasn't even featured in the Global Guardians issue where Green Fury debuted. So what happened? Because the Tora Olafsdotter version of the character appears in 1988, so well post-Crisis from 1985. The Tora version of Icemaiden would appear during the Justice League International run. Does that mean that Sigrid never made it over? No, that version also made it over. We're about to enter the mistake territory. Sigrid's version of Icemaiden had been brought into the main post-Crisis DC continuity before the JLI in Infinity Inc. number 32, written by Roy and Dan Thomas. Roy Thomas being another canon fiend, and he would often use Infinity Inc. to just tie up little details about things like why characters had different costumes and the like. Entire issues dedicated to things like that. So it wasn't really a surprise that when the Global Guardians appear there along with the rest of the team is the Sigrid version of Icemaiden. Now it looks like this may be the issue that was used as reference before the JLI, because in this story there is a section all about how Fire, or Green Fury, changed her name from Green Fury to Green Flame because there was another character named Fury running around. But Sigrid wasn't named. But when you first see Fire and Ice, as they will later come to be called in the JLI, and Beatriz is identified as Green Flame. Infinity Inc. 32 was 1986. Now we got a flash forward to 1988. Now we're in the JLI run, and the Global Guardians are presented as out of money, and Green Flame and her bestie Icemaiden are looking for a new team to join. But there are some obvious differences right off the bat. This Icemaiden looked entirely different. No blue skin, short white hair, but she was still called Icemaiden and was on the Global Guardians. They don't call each other by their real names in this issue, but it can't be denied just by looks that the Icemaiden looks very different. You don't get their names for a bit either. It takes several issues. For a while, they're just referred to as Green Flame and Icemaiden from the Global Guardians. The book's creative team of Giffen, DeMatteis, and Maguire are forthcoming in later interviews that they didn't know much about the Global Guardians and that it had been editorial suggestion to use some characters from them because DC had been playing with them. Giffen even admitted to not liking the Global Guardians, or rather not thinking they were cool, stating, "I believe it was Andy Helfer, who was an editor, that sat me down and said, why don't you use a couple of Global Guardians? Because we had been playing around with them a little bit in the Justice League book, using them as guest stars. Andy was really interested in that, how the Global Guardians concept played off of the Justice League International." Okay, no offense to the Global Guardians or anyone who came up with any of these characters. So, Bridwell, no offense to Bridwell. But we figured, let's take the lamest characters. And there's not really much enthusiasm about the concept for using fire and ice, even though the creators would come to be more fond of them as they shaped them and worked with them and then would enjoy seeing how they evolved. But initially, not too much enthusiasm. Giffen stated, "Fire was originally called Green Flame." See, note that. No, she wasn't. She was called Green Fury. So you know that they didn't go too far back. And this info is also coming to them from editorial. Anyway, more quote. "She could spit green flame. She was a human Bic lighter. That's all she could do. She couldn't burst into flames. She could spit on you and a little flame would come out." That's not entirely accurate if you look back at her Super Friends appearances. Also, she could spit cold fire as well. And Ice was an ice goddess, and that's all they ever said about her. So as one can glean from that, it was pretty much that the creative team took the information presented to them by editorial, which was in and of itself not entirely as far-reaching as it could have been because it was disregarding, it seems, any pre-crisis canon, which in a way makes sense because DC had relaunched the entire universe, and so they seem to be using just what was in play in the new universe going forward. However, it may have behooved the editors to go all the way back because that was how the information of the character having a name was missed. And also because there wasn't much enthusiasm from the creative team to use them in the first place, there wasn't much motivation to go and just make sure that every single detail had been found and hunt down every single issue. So basically, the creative team behind the book was unaware that Icemaiden already had a civilian identity, and so then named the character. And because of that, essentially created a new one. They named their Icemaiden Tora Olafsdotter, who already was coming across as separate because the look had been changed. And there seemed to be a kind of oh well attitude when it was noticed. That was until Icemaiden, the Tora version, was killed. It took a while for Tora to be called Ice. There are many issues of her being called Icemaiden for years. It went on for years. The thing is, fans came to really enjoy Tora, and they didn't like the idea of her dying very much. And Mark Waid, who killed her, even said it was a plot he regretted doing, stating on Gail Simone's Woman in Refrigerators website, oh yes, I have quotes from that site, "I'm responsible for the death of Ice. My call, my worst mistake in comics, my biggest regret. I remember hearing myself ask the editor, who's the JLAer whose death would evoke the most fierce gut reaction from readers? What a dope. Mea culpa." Well, fans did not like Dead Ice, but this is where the mistake from the original creators came in handy. Because technically, there was another Icemaiden running around, Sigrid. That character had just been thrown into the background, just floating around in the ether, lost in the void like Tanya Spears. And so Sigrid was brought back into the picture officially, and that also cemented them, even though it was already obvious, as separate characters. And in Justice League of America 102, a whole backstory was given to Sigrid to explain where the character had been, the blue skin, all of it. Now Sigrid had a tragic backstory. "Sigrid, haven't you finished your thesis yet?" "I'm trying, Mom. Maybe I'm just no genius like you." "Miss Nansen, we want to keep you as our research assistant, particularly in view of all your mother has contributed to biochemistry. But your work, well, with the UN backing the Global Guardians, our government is pushing hard for a Norwegian member. We're trying to replicate the powers of the legendary ice people of the mountains." "I know I've disappointed you in the lab, but I hear you're looking for experimental subjects." And so Sigrid was experimented upon and became Icemaiden and joined the Global Guardians, only for Tora and her people to then be discovered. Devastated at the discovery of a real Icemaiden and that causing an entire identity crisis, Sigrid quit the Global Guardians, leaving Tora as the sole Ice member. This would then rectify how both versions of the character could have been on the Global Guardians and known Fire, Green Fury, Green Flame, all the names. This was meant to explain away the confusion. And as far as retcons go, it's pretty solid. It ties up the things that it needs to, minus the inevitable, well, why wasn't this character ever mentioned before? But that then kind of plays into the self-esteem issues. But while that confusion was cleared up, there was some more that was created, especially with the, I don't want to say romance plot, because it wasn't very romantic, but it was interesting plot between Sigrid and Fire, and the manipulation that Sigrid tried to employ to get Fire to care by dressing up as Tora and trying to replace her. That whole arc was very, very interesting. There were some complicated feelings in that arc, but that's also why for fans of a certain era, there's extra confusion as to whether Fire and Ice were dating or not, because you'll see some of these pictures of Fire and Sigrid Icemaiden, that on top of just the interactions between Fire and Ice, and it's just, for some, it added to the confusion. However, by the time Sigrid was reintroduced, Tora had firmly cemented herself as Icemaiden or Ice, and was the character that fans were more attached to. She had effectively taken over that role. It was her mantle. People wanted to see her interact with Fire and have adventures with the rest of the DC universe, not really Sigrid. And Tora would eventually be brought back. There would be a whole going to hell and getting her plot. And Sigrid would eventually fade into the background once more, and just be brought up in surprising instances, like being flayed alive so that Dolores Winters could have skin, beautiful ice skin. Time of recording, the character was brought back in the Justice League queer story in the 2021 holiday anthology "'Tis the Season to be Freezin'," where the Icemaiden moniker was changed to Glacier. Maybe that will help, and maybe more will be done with the character in the future. Maybe it is the future and Glacier is everywhere. However, as it stands, Tora is the one who dominates people's thoughts when it comes to the ice, and even at times the Icemaiden mantle, since she went by that for a while as well. And also because that happened during the character's memorable era of the JLI run and then onwards. And so we have another tale about how not really looking into character details too much led to having to do some pretty elaborate retconning later on. Admittedly, it's one of the smoother retcons. Tora remains the breakout, and it's interesting that she owes her existence to a mistake caused by lack of interest in the team she was supposedly hailing from. This was a happy mistake though. There are no mistakes, just happy little accidents. That's not true at all. There are mistakes. Mistakes are real, but you can do things to correct and work with them. Paint some happy little ice. We've talked a little bit more about Sigrid over on Shorts, and we also took a look at Fire and Ice's latest mini, Welcome to Smallville, the first issue. So if you need more icy goodness, you have those to check out. Did you know about this? Were you ever confused by Ice/Icemaiden? Do you want to know more about the Sigrid Fire not-mance? You want to hear about the cursed blip that was Fire dating Guy Gardner? What other accidents led to plots or characters that you like? Tell me down below. While you're down there, please all the YouTube things: like, share, comment, subscribe. Thanks so much for taking some of your day spent discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.